Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Brown Bag Lit. We're so happy that you're here. I'm Shasta Grant, co-founder of Brown Bag Lit, along with Chloe Miller. We host classes, events, and are home to Lunch Break Writers, which is a writing accountability group that meets on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time. You can find more information about our programming on our website. Our next event is Visual Stories, Personal Truths, a conversation on graphic memoirs on Monday, December 2nd. Today, we are super excited to welcome Cassie Mannes Murray. Cassie is the founder and director of Pine State Publicity. She's going to talk about book promotion and working with a publicist, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. You're welcome to put questions directly into the chat as she's talking or later when she's taking questions, or you're welcome to raise your hand when she's taking questions. We do ask that while she's talking that you stay muted. Welcome, Cassie.
Hi. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see faces that I only ever see in like the little bubbles of social media. Um, yeah, I'm so excited to talk with you today and answer any questions you have about publicity. I, like Shasta said, am the founder of Pine State Publicity. So we work primarily on independent books, poetry, memoir, narrative nonfiction, essays, literary fiction, a little bit of commercial fiction. I tend to like to work on weird little books or like hybrid books, um, books that agents will tell you will not sell. That's sort of my like bread and butter. Um, and I have two colleagues at Pine State too, Zoe, who also works as an agent, and Alicia, who was a publicist at Catapult before Catapult did what Catapult did and closed down their magazine and did all the shifting. So yeah, I'm going to be talking from that perspective a little bit today. I can talk about the big four publicity game too, but my work is usually in independent books. So that's most of my knowledge and expertise. Yeah, I guess I'll talk to you a little bit about like the publicity cycle. Some of you might be in the throes of querying right now, or you're sending out your manuscript to publishers. And I work on the other end of things. So you've done all that, your book has been accepted, you've signed the contract, you're like plugging along. I will come on to a book like 6 to 9 months out from the publication date. So probably right after you finished your last copy edit and they tell you can't make any more edits on the manuscript is when I am joining in with you. And my work is to get your book seen, basically. You heard and your book seen. Those are my two goals for publicity. And my secret third goal is like to create momentum for you as a writer, to really keep going on the publicity journey after we're done working together. So I am pitching media and everyone wants to know sort of what that looks like. And I say, like 6 to 9 months out, I'm pitching like long lead media, like your Good Morning America Book Club. That sort of media is the long lead. Like your big newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, your book forum, anything like that, anything that needs like a long time and a lot of follow-ups on my end to be like, are we still doing this? What's happening? And then I'm shrinking it down all the way to like your neighborhood newsletter, like is probably the last place I'll pitch, or like your alumni magazine at your college. So that is like 6 to 9 months of work on the publicity side. And books are strangely different from like publicity for movies and TV, because it only takes people like they go to the theater, they watch the movie, they can review it, right? Books, you need time. You need a month to read. You need a month to think about it. You have to coordinate with the author to do an interview. You have to maybe look at their other work, that sort of thing. So like it takes a long time to write a book. Publicity also on the book side takes a long time to get going. And inside and outside publicist job is to get you as much media as they can, like in the first month of publication. That's not true for poetry, but that is true for your larger fiction, nonfiction. Poetry tends to have a longer shelf life. This is like the one cheers for poets. Like the journey to publish a book might be hard, but you get like a long publicity cycle. It's really lovely. And I'm trying to like land all of that media in the first month of publication. Hopefully that will drum up more media, more events for you, and longer things like college visits, museum visits, reading your book, doing more interviews, that sort of thing. That is the publicity game. It is more complicated on my end than I'm making it sound, but that is sort of it. It's a lot of like pitching, following up, and trying to find the right way to frame something, or frame a person, frame an author, frame a book, and the several different ways I need to do that for each audience. Yeah, I am so happy to answer any questions. And even if they're like personal, my book, blah, 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 blah. I'm happy to answer those too.
We received a couple of emails ahead of time, and there's one,
Sure.
I just put it in the chat in case that's easier for folks to read it. Someone asked, her book came out in March 24, and for various reasons, the small press dropped the ball in getting the ARCs out, and her book was unavailable for the first 6 months after it came out because of the small press distribution meltdown. So do you have any advice about extending the publicity life of a book after that initial month or months? And this, I think, was fiction.
Oh, fiction. Okay, great. So I have a few things on this question. ARCs are like strangely important. We have, during the pandemic, everyone was accepting digital PDFs, which was great, amazing. We didn't have to ship that many physical books. Now we've sort of whiplashed back to everyone wanting a physical copy of a book. So that's a question I would say ask before you sign a contract with the press. Like, will they be sending physical copies of the book out to reviewers? During the small press distribution meltdown, that's so terrible. So my first piece of advice would be, if you're doing your own outreach, I would reach out to anyone who's previously published you. Like if you had short stories in literary magazines, or poetry in literary magazines, or if you write anything on the side, or like people that you're friendly with on social media who like edit magazines or are readers at magazines or places like that. And I would say, because of the small press distribution situation and my book's timing, it got basically no coverage. And I'd love you to consider an interview. I'm a previous contributor, or we've been friendly on social media, and I know that you work at Craft Literary. Like, would you be interested in me writing a piece on my book not getting any publicity, or writing a piece on this thematic element of my book, or writing about character building from a craft point of view? So you can do like a lot of the essay writing. You can also ask people to interview you and review the book. I think sometimes being honest is the best policy. And literary magazines have long publicity cycles. Like they're still reviewing books from several years ago. So that's a good space to like drum up some coverage, and then use those hits to like reach out to maybe bigger places and say, I've been reviewed in blank, blank, blank. Cleveland Review of Books that pays. Would you be interested in an interview with me based on these 3 reviews or these 3 interviews? Yeah. I think people, especially in the literary magazine community, have like a soft place for everything that happened with small press distribution. So I think they would be open probably to hearing.
I see there's a question from Jocelyn. If you want, Jocelyn, would you like to read it, or?
Oh, sure. Hi.
Hi.
I will read my question.
Yeah.
Are there publications or venues where it's actually better for the writers to reach out directly rather than the publicists? Like, if we do have those direct connections or those prior relationships, or if it's super hyper local, And so that we save, you know, sort of the bigger connections and the bigger gets for the publicist. I'm just curious about that dynamic.
Yeah, sometimes I switch back and forth with clients. Like they'll be like, I think it's better if my publicist reaches out, and I'll reach out, and then they'll have some weird connection. Like last week, somebody went through like a PTA mom to get into a book club in Boston. Like you never know like who the people are. And some cities like Austin is a very, very like communal city. And so me reaching out from my publicity in North Carolina does not really get me very far in Austin. So sometimes it's good for an author to be like, my publicist will get you details, and have me do sort of the coordinating back end stuff. But it works the other way too, where I would say like, there are places where I would be like, a writer should not reach out to these places. It will hurt your chances more than it will help. That's like case by case. Yeah, Jocelyn, I wish I had like a good general rule, but it's like a case by case thing. But obviously if you have a connection, it's so good for you to be like, it's hard because the writer can't be like, can you interview me, to their personal friends, you know? Well, you can on some levels, but so sometimes it's like, you were just talking with Nicole about her book. Like, do you want a copy for review? You know, it's like the sneaky, like, we're both talking to you, and the writer doesn't want to make it seem like they want the favor. And then I come in and ask for the actual favor. So yeah, it's like a tag team. It's always a collaborative effort, I guess, is my answer to that one.
Thank you. That's a good question. We have a question in the chat from Pamela. Pamela, would you like to unmute?
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Small press. I'm reading your question, Pamela.
Okay.
Yeah, sales are a funny thing. Pamela, I guess my question is like, did all of this happen at once, or was it like a sort of long journey? You know, like, did this happen across a year, or did this happen like in a splashy sort of way?
Well, the book was published in this past April. So it's been from April until, now. Yeah.
I would say in
6
that
months.
instance, it's just like finding the right thing that gives you momentum. It's hard because like events still are not garnering good sales for books, like any book.
Right.
So like readings and stuff like that. Book clubs are like an interesting space if you want to get your sales up, but that's like a lot of outreach because they're all small communities. So you're having to say like, does your book club of 14 people want to read my book? And yeah, that's just like a lot of tag teaming. I always tell writers it's about getting the one big thing that all the little things build on. So like sometimes to get the sales up, it's like you get the Washington Post and then like all the little things people are then following. I wonder too, like, was there any social media outreach for your story collection?
Yeah. I mean, the publisher didn't do much of anything. It was all me. So, and I've been a journalist for 30 years, so I know how to contact places and had stories placed in maybe 5 to 10 different spots. But still that didn't really translate. So I'm just, curious as to why that might be. If you had, maybe it's book specific, I don't know, but it's it's sort of like I've done all the right things and had success with them, but it just hasn't translated into sales.
I would be curious too, like about the story collection. Like, is it based around like one big, is it a thematically driven collection?
Yes. Yes.
Can I ask what the theme is?
Yeah, sure. It's called And Then You Apply Ice, and there are 21
Okay.
stories, 7 of which were published prior in different literary journals, all dealing with female empowerment and female resilience, basically transgressions and how we deal with them and pick up and move along. And I've been published in the New York Times and in all sorts of, notable publications. So, yeah. So the whole thing's sort of curious to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard if I'm not like the one behind it to explain like why it's not
Yes.
really working. Yeah, it's like any number of factors. Yeah,
Cassie,
I wish I had better thoughts for you.
Can I ask you, since you're primarily working with smaller presses, is it possible for you to give a range of what sales might be for a small independent press for both poetry collection, let's say poetry collection, short stories, essays, and a novel?
Sure. So like for me, good sales for a poetry collection would be like over in the pre-order stage up to like 6 months post-pub would be like over 1,500. Like I would feel good about a poetry collection getting that many sales. Fiction, like a novel, is so dependent on publisher. Fiction is like the most publisher dependent genre. I would say you're honestly, like full disclosure, you're doing good at 5,000. Yeah, like lots of books don't even sell close to that. And nonfiction is sort of this, it depends. Is it like a big idea book? Is it a memoir? Those things all matter with nonfiction. Short stories are sort of all over the map. Like has the person published a novel previously? Is this their debut? Are there flash stories in the collection? That seems to be like a major turnoff to regular readers, like the sort of juxtaposition of stories within a collection. So that could be a thing. Does it have like a thematic message, or are they all centered around like one community? Are they characters who know each other? Are the stories interlinked, basically? Yeah, it's hard because I think right now the books that are selling the most are like your big idea nonfiction books. And those aren't, small presses don't buy those. So.
Thank you. And I see someone has their hand up. Cataro?
Catarope, that's funny. Kate Rope. Thank you for hosting, Chloe and Shasta, and thank you for talking with us, Cassie. My question is, so I had a book come out in 2018. My publisher is St. Martin's Press, so it's a big press. The publicity department I'm not a big fish to them. So, they do what they do. But the last time I had a book come out in 2018 and I met with Sarah Birmingham of Little Bird Publicity and talked with her about, whether it made sense, because it was a big budget item to think about private publicity. And what we came to there was, because I've been a journalist all my career and I have a lot of contacts exactly with the kinds of publications that would reach the audiences my book will reach, it didn't necessarily make sense for me. Now, flash forward 6 years, my next book's coming out next fall. The media landscape has changed completely, right? So I've been working in nonprofit and making money other ways, and I'm getting back into the freelance world, but all the places have shrunk, dried up where I used to. And so I'm questioning now this time around whether that changes the cost benefit of hiring a private publicist, with the added element of how much the author's platform and, on the ground, boots on the ground work is also important, is critical. So I'm trying to figure out how to make that choice. Easy
I'm
question.
so biased. Yeah, it's a hard choice because like every contract that you're going to read from an outside publicist is going to say like, I cannot determine whether this will be successful, you know? So you're sort of like, it's a game of chance any way you pull it. I think anyone you talk to, you should ask, like, are there books in similar spaces with authors in similar spaces that you've been really successful with, or like really unsuccessful? I tend to not, like, this is hard to say. Okay, on the agenting side of things, I tend to believe platform is very important. It's very important to agents and to selling the book to a press, right? On the publicity side of things, I can do anything I want without a platform. Like, I can build an author's platform. That's not an issue for me. Is it helpful if I can say, like, they've been published in the New Yorker, they're a previously acclaimed poet? Yes, all of those things are helpful. But really, like, I can build an author's platform on like what the book is doing and what they're bringing to the table through the publicity cycle, through like talking points, interview questions, that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's something to think about if you're looking, like, especially if there's something that you want, like if you wanted to sell your next book bigger, like there's a reason why you want your platform to grow larger. You want to make royalties. I mean, they can be like very small goals, you know, or big goals. You said you're getting back into freelancing. So if you want to meet the right contacts, you know, going down the road, then you want a publicist who has those people. The problem I'm seeing with like people who are coming from the journalist perspective who are maybe writing fiction is that their contacts at a newspaper are not passing to the book people.
Oh yeah, I'm writing
people,
nonfiction, I should say.
Okay, so the book people are like all freelancers, you know? So you want a publicist, not necessarily who knows the people who are working in media. Like, I know the book editor at Elle. I rarely pitch her because I'm pitching all the people who freelance pitch her because they regularly are working with her. So I'm pitching like her rotation instead of her. You know what I mean? So that's where a freelance publicist, the right person, is going to help you in those ways. I think it also depends what you want out of publicity. I always tell writers, like, what kind of writer are you? Are you somebody who wants to like do the dance in front of a crowd? Like, are events important to you? And what kind of events? Like, books, you can go on a book tour. Anyone can go on a book tour, you know? Do you want to do museum speaking? Do you have a certain bent in your book that you want to speak to, like say it's on mental health. So do you want to do like the mental health nonprofit circuit, foundations, that sort of thing? Conferences in that realm. There's like a lot of different angles to publicity. So you have to decide like, what are your angles and can you do them yourself? Or do you want like a collaborative partner? I don't know if that was helpful.
That was helpful. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
We have 2 more emailed questions. If we could do those, and then we'll come to Mo. So one person asked, how soon should reviews be out after a book is published?
Oh, okay. So it depends on the book. But I am trying to get everything to land in the first month of publication. I don't necessarily believe that as a publicist. I think books can have like a much longer life than that. But that's our current publicity cycle in media demands that. So that is what I'm working with. But if I have an author whose book is landing really well in that month after publication, we'll extend time together and try to build on the momentum that's happening. I don't necessarily want you to get 20 big reviews and then like nothing happens and you're like, okay, I'm back at my desk writing my next book. Like, I got these reviews, they were great, they meant nothing, you know? My goal is to make our authors like the person who you need to reach out to about X, Y, and Z, whatever they're writing. So yeah, I think you want them to land in the first few months, I would say.
Thank you. And the last emailed question we had was about post-publication book awards and how important they are for publicity.
I mean, the National Book Award is great for publicity. But also like your Forward Indie Book Award is great for publicity. I'm not going to say awards are not good for publicity because they are, but there's like a cost benefit to that too. Like if you're the reason you never see indie books in the National Book Awards is because their press can't afford the publicity fee to be on the finalist list. There is a fee to get on the list, and it's large. So yeah, you're sort of debating. I don't think a lot of the awards though are like more than $75 to enter. So I would like make a list. With my clients, we make a list of like all the awards that they could potentially submit to. And then we choose like what are the most important and what are the ones that we think there's a shot sort of thing. And like how much you want to put towards submitting that. Lots of small presses do those though. So like it's worth asking your press, like, will you submit to 10 awards for me? Especially like your regional, like Ohio, for example, has the Ohio Excellence Awards. They have the Ohio Book Award. They're great. They're amazing. Like, and they're very helpful with like your local media, your regional media, that sort of thing, to say that an author won that previously or is the winner now. So yeah, they matter to the extent that they matter to you and what you want for your career, I would say.
I like this approach of not we must do these things, but rather what are you looking for as an author?
Yeah.
Mo, would you like to unmute and talk about your question?
Hi, thank you. Start out. Thank you so much. Hi, Chloe. As I wrote here, I have a novel coming out with University Press next fall, which is very exciting. And I'm
Exciting.
After having been with a big five and not having, I had an okay experience, but in the subsequent years since that happened, like it has been conveyed to me that I am not big five material anymore. So I'm really pleased to have the second opportunity with West Virginia University Press, which is a great university press. But as they were a university press, there is a limitation to like what they can offer me. And I went into the contract wholeheartedly accepting that. So my question is just sort of like, what are the things that, knowing that there are limited resources that I should ask for, or some things that like I could possibly do on my own as we start our publicity journey with my novel?
Well, lucky for you, West Virginia University Press is like amazing at publicity.
Oh,
And they have like a good long history of being amazing at publicity, so you can use that to your benefit.
okay.
I will say that sometimes they hire an outside publicist. So you should ask for that. Like on the just in case that like you could be assigned one.
I will ask. They didn't offer that when we were doing the contract per se.
Yeah, I would ask though. Just ask. So I would ask them, my first question would be, how many galleys are you going to get? Because they do send galleys. One of the things that I find small presses, I'm not going to say fail at, but a mistake that they make is they have like a list of 50 people that they send the galley to, and they do it for all of their books. And it changes like 5 or 10 people for each book, depending on what the book is. And they just mail it to a mailroom, and it just dies in the mailroom because no one has been like, hey, we sent you this book. So I would ask your editor or the inside publicist for that list so that if they're not reaching out directly to the place, like if they're going to send a book to the New York Times, it would be in your best interest to then reach out to an editor there that you think has a kinship with what you wrote and say, hey, West Virginia University Press already mailed you an ARC, but here's a little bit more about my book, and try to make it like as personable, publicist-y as you possibly can. So that you're doing the follow-ups for the books that have already been mailed, like they already have a copy. But you're doing that little like personal piece of it. Authors can do their own events. It's annoying, but it can be done. I would say like start a list now since this next fall, you said, right? So, okay, I would start a list of like everyone you see on social media that has like an inkling of interest in anything you wrote about in that book. Especially if they're like in any literary world. Bookstagram, have a little saved list in Instagram if you're on there of like people who might be interested, and just like save the photos in a little saved box. Start a list of like essays you could write on the side, or things that you cut from the book that you could pitch out as ideas. Start pitching those. Say, I have a book coming out next fall. In the next calendar year, are there any monthly things or any, like for instance, Elle did a big like friendship issue last year. So are there themes in your book that align with their editorial calendar? Can I write something for some part of your editorial calendar next year to the bigger places, right? Start a list of talking points about your book. Angles. It can be like the weird, like even if you're like, this is the weirdest thing, like no one is going to get this from my book, but when I was writing it, this was an inspiration to me. It helps me so much as a publicist when I get these like 100 random things lists of things associated with the book. Like I just worked on a tarot book of creative prompts. And like part of her research was like in satanic rituals. And so we pitched a bunch of like podcasts about like how satanic stuff in tarot has been like aligned in the media, and yet it is like the furthest thing apart in actuality and in practice. And that got so much traction. Like your strange, what you think is like strange about your book is really the thing that is the publicity point. The line that everyone told you to cut, and you're like, but I love it. I love it so much. Like there's a reason that you love it. And that is probably where like the juice is. You want to pull that out.
I know exactly what line that is.
It's probably like the thing. It's like the to distill your book down. That's probably the thing. I lean on the side of like when I'm pitching books, the strange thing is the thing that matters. Or like the scene I can't let go of is the thing that matters. It's not this big, like, this is a family drama about blah, 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 blah. It's this one scene about this one girl on roller skates, right? That's what everyone's going to attach to. That's what I need to put in my pitch. So I would make a list of those things in your book. And then just start like, I call it like my middle school Google searching. Like when I was like trying to figure out everything about someone that I just met. You're just going to do that for all the things that you wrote in your list. Like who's written about this, who's interested in this. And those are the people that you're going to pitch your book to. And unfortunately for all of us, everyone's email is either guessable or online already. So, or DM them. All they can say is no or not answer you. You're in the same boat. Like just release all shame. Go for it. Okay, those are I think that
was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. Release all shame. This is very encouraging. Yes, a bumper sticker sounds right. Are there mistakes that we writers often make that we can avoid?
I think because I work like with indie books and indie authors, there's this idea that like, well, that'll never happen for me. So I'm just going to take that off the table now. Like I'm allowed to have dreams to this extent. And I think that's the industry's fault. Like they say to you like, well, you'll never be in the New Yorker. So there's no point. There's always a point. In my like release all shame mantra, you should pitch everyone that could potentially be interested. There are no limits. I have had ridiculous things happen for books that were small, like for poetry, for things that people would say like, well, no one is going to be interested in this. That's not true. If you pitch it right, or the angle is right, or you get a person during their 2 p.m. slump and they're like, oh, this was an interesting email. Like, I definitely want to open this book. Like, things happen. The limits are not true necessarily. So I would say the limiting beliefs is one thing authors do. It is a collaboration, and you should be in release all shame annoying. You signed a contract with these people. They owe you certain things that they put in that contract. I don't care if it's Big Four. I don't care if it's the littlest zine press on the planet. If there's anything they can do for you, or they said at one point that they could do for you, or you need to check back in 4 times about a certain thing, please do it. You only publish a book once or ever so often. Your book is very important. It's your work. No one is going to fight for it like you do. So my best experiences with clients are clients who are annoying, in the most lovable way I can say. It's a collaboration. If you see somebody online that you're like, this person would love my book, they just said they loved this book, tell your press, send them an email. Like, here's 5 things I saw in the news this week. And it made me think that, like, I could write a piece on blah, blah, blah. I could write an op-ed about blah, 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 blah. Like, it's so much better when it's not silence from an author. Or they're just like letting me silently work on my side. I mean, as much as I love like a good deep focus, like, that collaboration and that brainstorming is so important. And so many side essays that I've landed have been just me and an author talking on Zoom, being like, well, what do you think writing about this? Or like this one random thing I read in the book. Like, next year I'm working on a book about cats. And so the cat lady, like, thing that we're in right now is like such a big deal for this book. Yeah. And just like, so I'm saving all the people who are like, I love my cat on Twitter, just in case, you know, just because. So be annoying is my other piece of advice. Ask for all the things. They can only say no. And you asked. So. Yeah.
Cassie, I have a question. I don't know if this really falls under the publicity umbrella, but what are your thoughts on blurbs? I've been hearing conflicting things, that they matter, they don't matter. Do you have any advice for writers, especially if you're going to be reaching out to people outside of your circle and sort of begging for them to read your book and blurb it? Is it worth it or not?
Yeah, it's always worth it. My advice on blurbs is to give people as much time as you possibly can. Because everyone's going to need an extension on time for reading. So if you're like, okay, I need this blurb in 12 weeks or something, reach out at the 16-week point, right? Like give everyone wiggle room, especially right now. We're in chaos right now. There's a difference between like the blurbs that are going to go on your physical book and the blurbs that are going to be used for publicity purposes. Across the board, I will say, if you've seen the person blurb a bunch of books, don't ask them. Because, like, an example, I love her, but Gina Frangello blurbs every essay collection that women write. I love her. I trust her opinion, but at some point it becomes like, okay, but which one do you really love? You know, like, so I would ask people who like have name recognition. There are people who have like cult followings that a blurb from them is going to go much farther. Like Carmen Marie Machado, a blurb from her, like her fans are rabid for more Carmen Marie Machado. So like if she blurbs a book, she doesn't blurb that often, people are going to buy it. So that will move books. Melissa Febos moves books, right? A blurb from her is important. So ask people with name recognition who aren't blurbing everything. Ask people you love. It's going to matter more to you to see like your favorite author blurb your book. I don't think you need 20 blurbs. I don't know why big publishers are doing like the 10 blurbs. You do need like one that's got like one really good line for your book, you know, or one like really good distilled line. You can't determine who that's going to come from. So like it could be the last person you ask just writes this amazing, beautiful blurb. I remember like a few months ago, I was working on the copy for a book, like the back cover copy for a client. And one of the, like, we finished it, they checked it off, it went to print, right? And then one of her blurbs came in and we just wanted to steal the blurb for the cover copy. Like, it was like, oh, I wish we had this blurb because we could have just, this could have been the cover, you know? that sort of thing will happen. So like, you don't know who's going to write your best blurb. I feel like they matter on the back of the book, not as much as you think. They do matter on Amazon. So like, if somebody searches the blurber's name on Amazon, your book will come up with it, like algorithmically. So like, think about sales, like people who are selling a lot of books, or in sort of the cultural conversation at the moment when you're asking blurbs, so that when people search them, you also come up. I think my recommendation would be like, ask 6 people, hope for 3. 6 is amazing too. Like, I wouldn't get rid of any that come in, that sort of thing. And I don't think everyone agrees with me on this, but I would ask people who have very different audiences, because that will help you bring in their audience. So I don't think poets should only ask poets. I don't think novelists should only ask novelists. If you're writing like a literary mystery, then you need to ask literary people and mystery people. Bring in as much as you can with blurbers, I think is helpful. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you. Debbie asked, Debbie, would you like to unmute?
Sure. So you and I have had some email contact because I reviewed Jessica Jacobs' book On Alone, which you didn't ask me for. I wanted to review it. I asked Jessica. She put me in contact with you. But you all are really intimidating me. You know, I'm micro publisher, not, not the big ones you've been naming. And does it even make sense for someone like me to use a publicist? I mean, I don't know if you know Janine, I forget her full name, Galley. She wrote a book on how to, market your poetry book. And is that just what I should do? Or does it make sense to hire a publicist?
Debbie, who are you publishing with?
My third one is not out yet. The Grayson Books is the last publisher I had, and it came out. So she's micro, and it came out during the pandemic.
Oh, what do you want? I think is the question. So Jessica Jacobs' book was like wildly successful. She's going to be on tour for the next like 3 years of her life.
Right.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think
my poetry. that's
I think
royalties. I want my poetry read.
Yeah. We have a lot of luck with poetry. We do a lot of poetry books. I think part of it is like there's not a big market for poetry publicity, so like we're just out here, doing it. But the best thing about poetry publicity, if you're a poet, is that poets really review poets. Like, poets respect each other. The game is reciprocal in poetry. And it's not in a quid pro quo way. It's like a real community effort to like bring a poetry collection to the forefront. And there's a lot of ways to get like bigger sales in poetry. There's a lot of ways to like get paid for doing like college visits, or Poets House like pays for workshops, or Hudson Valley Writer Center, like there's lots of ways to like help offset the cost of publicity. I will say like our poetry publicity does not cost the same necessarily as our like big nonfiction book. But yeah, poets need publicists too. And I think the good thing about poets is like speaking matters as much as reviews. Maybe even more so. So if you're like a great reader, like it's worth it, I think. I'm so biased. You're asking me. Yeah, I think there are great poetry publicists too that I can recommend that might be interested.
Okay.
Stella asked, what was the name of the book about promoting poetry books?
I'm going to go look it up and put it in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Cassie, we don't have another question right now. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about how you work with someone, maybe what the time commitment would be, if you can give a range of prices?
Sure. We don't have a range of prices. It's sort of like, we tried to have like a sort of you can choose. It didn't really work because everyone wants something different out of publicity. But we usually, our typical campaign is 7 months, which is 6 months before the book comes out and then 1 month afterwards. And we range in price, I will say, from like $1,000 a month to like $2,400 a month, I think is like our biggest campaign. And that's someone who just wants to do like everything imaginable. Yeah, it looks different depending on the book, I will say. I think part of that is like when I became a publicist, I had never done publicity before, and I started in 2.5 years ago. So I like don't know if I'm making a mistake, which is very fun. And also why I probably have no shame, because I'm like, well, this mistake just led me into the New York Times, you know? And I just sort of try things and see what happens. So you need to talk to publicists before you hire them, or I would say like talk to a range of inside publicists. And we're literally all in a Slack together. Not all of us, but like 120 of us are all in a Slack together. So if like I'm not the right person for you, we read all our books before we work on them, because I want to make sure I love something before I'm pitching it out. I can recommend you like 10 other people. So if you're like looking for publicity and you're like, I don't think like y'all are necessarily the right fit, like looking at what you've worked on in the past, feel free to reach out and I can be like, oh, this is your person. Or these 3 people would be like really good in this arena. Like I'm not very commercial in my taste. So when I get sort of like a commercial book, I'm like, let me pass you to someone else. But yeah, and we all talk to each other. So like if I don't necessarily have a contact, I can go in that Slack and be like, who's the best person here for this weird thing? And that's what you want, right? A community behind your book rather than just a person. You also want somebody who's going to fight for you, especially in like the indie small press community. I do a lot of like, hey, are we ever going to have a digital galley of this book? Hey, have you ordered copies? Hey, who is the distributor? And can they get 20 copies to this bookstore? So I do a lot of like bad cop stuff for clients in the nicest way, as kind as I possibly can. Because a lot of small press authors also don't have agents, so you don't have that person who's doing that for you. So I am like sort of taking up that mantle. Yeah.
I wanted to add that we learned about Cassie because she sent us some really great authors and program ideas. So we've really enjoyed that. I think Shasta has a question.
Cassie, can you talk about readings, events, whether they are important, especially for introverts who maybe aren't very comfortable with them? Are they still worth doing if they're really outside your comfort zone?
Sure. I think it's nice for everyone to have like a launch event. You know, I think like if you have an indie bookstore that you love in your town and like your family and friends want to celebrate your book, get yourself a book cake, like have that launch event, like do the thing for your friends and family. Events are important and can extend the publicity life cycle. So if my author is on tour, like a month and a half post pub, right? And they have an event in Seattle and they are not from there, I can still pitch the Seattle Times and all the Seattle weeklies about them to see if they want to interview or review the book. So events help in that way. Also, like your local newspaper is more likely to cover your book if you have an event or a launch event. So they are important from a publicity standpoint. I will say if that's not your thing, there's many other ways to get publicity. So you can feel great about like, we can still be like local author publishes debut, you know. There's just publicity is like laundry. Like I'm never going to reach the end of pitching a book. Like I can find 300 more contacts when the book is out. I find people all the time where I'm like, I wish I had found this person like 3 months ago when I was working on this book. And so, yeah, it's sort of like a choose your own adventure type thing, more so than I must write essays, I must get reviews, I must get interviews, I must do a whole book tour. Yeah, it could be what you like. Oh, that's Catherine's, yeah. Only sell at events.
If someone were interested in becoming a publicist, do you have some advice?
Ooh. Publishing is a apprenticeship job, which is not really anything like it anymore. So you want to like work under somebody who is good, I think, before you start something on the agenting side, on the publicity side, and the editorial side. Unfortunately, that means like starting at an internship usually. But yeah, I would just like, I'm all for like reaching out to people on LinkedIn who have the jobs that you want and then being like, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes? And they can say no and not answer you. But most people are like, I would love to talk about myself for 30 minutes. So yeah, that's what I recommend.
Excellent. Thank you. And I know none of us can see the future. But if you were to guess the future for, let's say, the next 4 years or so, what might you recommend for considering topics or publicity or writing? We had a question in a separate private event where someone was concerned about writing about certain topics that might become banned or be more challenging under the new administration.
Yeah, I think that's like a real concern. But I think if you're writing something about that could potentially be banned, there is like an equal, if not more, pendulum swing to people who want to write about those books. So, I mean, banned books get good publicity. So there's that awful thing. Also, I think people are going to be really looking for joy. Negative wins out in every sort of situation. But I think anytime you can like write about joy or publish something with joy, like that will be widely read. I think when you're writing, especially like side essays, if you're about to publish a book or like lists or whatever, think about people's like emotional bandwidth at any given time. Will publishing this just be in a vacuum of noise sort of thing? I work with a lot of literary writers who tend to be like slower writers. And so I don't really recommend like chasing the zeitgeist. It's nice if you can write an op-ed in 3 days, but like we would have to like, you'd have to write it in a night, then pitch it the next day. You know, like that Fast and Furious just like doesn't work for many writers because they don't write that way. That's like a journalist, it's book journalist timeline. So just focus on writing like really strong pieces that sort of break through the noise, I would say. I think a lot of people are also concerned about like the demise of Twitter. And there's so many spaces. So just find your space. Like, are you a Substack person? Are you a Threads person? Are you an Instagram person? That sort of thing. Yeah. Oh, Lindsay, no, we are going to manifest against that. I actually know so many amazing editors who are looking for queer books right now. So many good ones. Like some of my favorite people at the Big Four. So you will be in good hands. Yeah, and Blue Sky is good too. I would definitely make space there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your time with us.